And he has written a book entitled With Knowledge and Virtue to Save the Earth from Global Warming and Nuclear Weapons. As our President mentioned today, this is the AHEPA District 21 Golden Gate Lecture Series. AHEPA is the American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association, founded in 1922. In our first fraternal organization, founded in 1922 in Atlanta by 5 Greek restaurant owners whose restaurants were being bombed by the Ku Klux Klan. We are the largest Greek American organization promoting the virtues of Hellenism, and we are very welcome to welcome our speaker, Dr. Demas.
Thank you, Yanni, for the introduction. The subject of today, as you can see, you all see it on the screen, right? With knowledge and virtue to save the world from global warming and nuclear war. When I started writing the book, I thought about the two major problems that the world is facing today, which is the global warming and nuclear war. But in the beginning, I spent a lot of philosophical time and gave some history of how man has progressed through all these years, how he gained knowledge and how he's using the knowledge, and how we can make the world better in terms of Parity, which means excellence in this particular configuration, and virtues, which are meaning the same thing, excellence, and how we can proceed. Man has achieved a lot of great achievements. We can marvel at the great men of literature, the gems of art, industry, the pyramids of Egypt, Parthenon, philosophy, democracy, all the Renaissance arts, the classical music, and all of that, the instruments to gauge the universe, medicines, transistors, and so forth. All these are fantastic technical wonders that man has achieved excellence in that regard. However, the saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. This was said by Isaac Asimov, the writer of the past century. So while the world is reaching constantly new levels of technical excellence in many, many endeavors, it is not reaching wisdom and ethical excellence in the mind and the soul of the people. We have not cultivated enough ethical excellence or virtue in the human race. So we are facing two existential problems: the global warming, nuclear or thermonuclear war. The global warming, a lot of people believe, some of them don't, but we can see so many things that are happening in our planet. We are breaking records in Australia. Last year, they reached something like 55 degrees C. In Siberia, near the North Pole, we hit 38 degrees C, and for that region of the Earth, it's very, very hot for that part. So, should we worry about it? In my presentation, I think, along with worrying about it, is that humanity is going to achieve great excellence and better life. On the nuclear war or thermonuclear, the difference is one of them is using nuclear bombs or the other one hydrogen bombs. We're going to go into detail of what has been happening in that area and why we should worry about it. We're going to discuss first the global warming, First, I must say we have the most wonderful planet, Earth. We live on this planet, and we cannot think of any other planet that can be so good. It receives in one day all the energy from the sun that the entire world uses in a year, which is tremendous amount. We are positioned in the ideal distance from the sun, which means we have a reasonable day and night, ideal atmosphere with oxygen. We don't have to wear, if we were in Mars, we would be walking around with a mask supplying us oxygen, because there's hardly much oxygen in the atmosphere. The size of the Earth is just at about the size so that we can walk around comfortably. Otherwise, you can imagine if the gravity was much, much higher or much lower. And the Creator tilted the axis of the Earth to surprise us, and we can have summer and winter. This wonderful planet we must protect from those two possible, I would say, real dangers. The issue first that we're going to talk, which is global warming, is a real revolution in renewable energy. Whether or not you have seen it or not, it has started, and it is accelerating at such a great speed. It is gathering speed, nothing can stop it, and we're witnessing the dawn of a new era in energy production. It is promising to supply cheap energy for electricity and transportation by using electric cars and trains. Now, what makes this possible? Everybody wants clean air, but it's more than that. Clean air, and what is making this revolution easy is the cost. And we're going to get into the cost a little bit more. I have a few numbers to give. And the cost means that the solar energy and wind energy are the cheapest form of energy. So it is economics that drives this. Our thermonuclear reactor, which is 92 million miles away, the sun, has been feeding all the energy to us since the Earth was formed. And the human intellect finally created the knowledge to harness this immense source of energy effectively and competitively. That is the most important thing. We're talking about, when we're talking about that energy is less expensive, we're talking about grid parity. In other words, why would I buy electricity from solar when I can buy it from coal or from any other source? The reason is it is cheaper. And it has happened in the last 5 years. It is cheaper practically in the entire United States and most parts of the world that get reasonable sun. And this applies not only to solar, but wind energy. They have reached the point for most regions of the Earth, and is causing the rest of the existing energy production that the transistor did in the vacuum tube and in the 1950s. We have the same thing happening now in energy. The transistor replaced all those vacuum tubes, then integrated circuits did all the marvels that we have today in electronics, and this happening in energy. I'm going to be talking about the levelized cost of electricity. The levelized cost of electricity means from the cost of electricity that is estimated from the original capital investment, maintenance costs are included, and various costs for various types of energy. And this levelized cost, for example, for electricity, you're going to build a nuclear reactor, you need $5–10 billion. You start working on it, takes 5 years to get your licenses and all of that. Then you build the reactor, and you don't get any electricity. You have tied up $5–10 billion, whatever it costs, and you don't get anything until the day when you open the doors. But when we are talking about solar energy, you buy the solar panels, you start, the crew is putting them down, and there's another crew of electricians following them, and essentially daily you start adding more and more electricity. You don't tie up much capital. It's just the original capital and labor to install it. We're looking now, this is kind of a general picture where we have the global population, global warming, and all the energy interrelationships. So in this chart, we have global population, and the global population is producing global warming through all of these energy types. The global population needs food, water, and shelter, and electricity, which is residential, industrial, commercial, and transportation. All this energy is two types: non-renewable energy and renewable energy. In the non-renewable, we have coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. But nuclear is not really a renewable energy because eventually we may run out of uranium or whatever. So that's a type of energy. And the first three, coal, oil, and gas, they are the contributors to global warming. And that's what we need to decrease: coal, oil, and gas. Renewable energy source is solar, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal, biomass or waste, and wave or tidal energy. So we want to move from this area here to this area, from non-renewable to renewable. It turns out the renewable, not only it is renewable, but it is clean. It doesn't produce any gases that are very terrible for man. This is an energy flow chart which is really produced by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. It has been doing this for at least 15–20 years. The only problem is coming out about a year or so, like in the spring we're going to have the 2020. So I'm going to show you the 2019. I'm showing you this one from 2014. Let me start with this one first. This one is the 2019. What I like you to notice, the most important thing, is that on the left-hand side we have all the renewable and non-renewable, all the sources of energy, where they are going to be used. Some of them to produce electricity, some of them to industrial, and petroleum is going primarily for transportation, our cars. There are two things that are really sticking out on this chart. First of all, these are the sources of energy, and of these sources, only this rejected energy, only this energy service down here below is the one that produces work, is useful. The other one is rejected energy, which means we just produce heat and gases, hot heat and gases that do no work whatsoever. If we go back here, the solar energy goes directly into electricity. There is no conversion. It just goes on the line, and it goes to be used in industrial, commercial, and residential. 100% being used, and it contributes to the energy services. The nuclear energy, the same thing. It is being produced, with the exception of the leftover uranium that is highly radioactive, and it is being stored in the factory or in the plant. It produces all the energy for electricity, as you can see here. Same thing with wind. No pollution, nothing. Geothermal, the same way. And here in California, we have probably the most of it up in Calistoga area. And essentially, they dig pipes down on earth. The ground at reasonable depths has high pressure and high thermal content, and then it comes up, it turns the generator, and then we pump the water back into the earth a few miles away. So we have a recycle going on, and the earth is really the heating element. And they are trying to get that in Nevada as well. And that one is a very clean form of energy. Let's look at natural gas. Natural gas used to be about 10 to 20% of the electricity. Now it has gone over to more than 35%. It's the #1 source of energy, and it's very clean compared to coal. And clean, we mean the CO2 is 30% of the, in comparison with the coal, which is 70%. And more than that, the CO2 that comes from coal burning, we're burning essentially something that we mine from the earth. And this coal has a lot of other materials, mercury and what have you. And that one is being essentially gets in the atmosphere. The CO2 has problems with the thermal rise temperature of the earth. And the other one is that it has all these very bad elements in it that we breathe, and they go in the water supply and so forth. The coal, we talked about the biomass. Now, that one is really more renewable. That comes from the trees, from the garbage and that we burn, and those are renewable. And it's not really polluting. It creates CO2, however, that tree that died, another tree comes up, and as a result it takes more CO2 from the earth, from the atmosphere. And we come to petroleum, which we call oil essentially. Now, if you notice here, practically all the coal is being used for production of electricity only, nuclear and so forth. The coal, a tiny amount of it is being used in industrial processes, making steel and things like that. Now the petroleum, as you can see, is totally going into transportation, and some of it going into industrial uses such as plastic and so forth. But notice this killer of energy right here, inefficiency. Inefficiency being used in producing electricity from coal and natural gas. Very little is being left for use here. And for the car, most of it is going out of the car as a form of heat. Very little energy, as you can see, only 20% of it is being used for good work, to do essentially to move the car. Now, the key to this whole thing is that the very dangerous, which is elements, coal and petroleum, have been great, but it is now they're being challenged by the batteries for this, and coal can be completely eliminated. And I will have something more about it to say about it later, more specifically. What we're seeing also here is I have a chart here from 2013-14, and you can see how much oil we were using at that time in comparison to others, where you can see the renewable energy produces very little. Nuclear is about the same, but coal and petroleum was being used a lot. So nuclear power is used, as we said, exclusively for electricity. All coal is used primarily for electricity, and gas is used in all forms of factors, electricity production, and you can see them. Now, the greatest thing is, the great news is that America can cut down the use of oil by at least half in less than 8 years. And we can import zero oil. Some people say that we really reached that point. It depends how we count it. We export some, we bring some in, but the big problem is that oil is expensive, and what it does to our balance of payments. And there is so much waste of energy being wasted driving around immense wasting vehicles. We have a fleet of our transportation, which is totally practically on oil, and at the same time the railroads. The Europeans have moved, and long time ago they are using only electric trains. We're talking about the freight trains. We have moved some of the cities are still using diesel trains, but the freight trains are also using diesel in this country. And it is expensive, and it pollutes, and very inefficient. In the last 10 years, 3 great technology advances have taken place that surprised all the experts. These 3 advances are solar energy, wind energy, and battery advances for electric cars and energy storage. Higher solar efficiency. Just 10 years ago, in order to make, you could buy, let's say, to create 1 watt, and it was costing $1 to $2. We're talking about just the silicon. It has gotten as low as 20 cents. And the reason for that is 20 cents per watt. And the reason for that is improving efficiency. Improving efficiency means that out of, let's say, 1 square meter, we were getting only 100 watts. Now we're getting 250. And there is research going on of different materials that can push it all the way up to 40. But the silicon one has a limit of 29. And in the lab, they have produced as much as 27%. And the ones that we're using out right now are about from 20 to 25. And we pushed into the high efficiency, very high volume production. There is one type of this which is called, got to get the right name for it, which is telluride, cadmium telluride, a company that has about 20% efficiency, but what's most important on the cost is that the panels, they're spraying the material on, and a panel, when it enters the factory, it comes out in 3-4 hours versus 24 hours for the silicon, for example. And they are roughly the same efficiency. And the wind, they used to have 1 megawatt turbines. Now they're all the way up 10 and 12. Just imagine how much energy those produced, 12 megawatts. The battery storage used in transportation is at a very critical point. It is expected to drop much farther in mass production and decreases costs. To give you the cost numbers, if they measure it dollars per kilowatt hour, you can, it has been up in the $200, $300, $400 per kilowatt hour, and now it has gotten down to 125, and within 2 years it will drop below $100. That's when cars with electrical motors will be less expensive than the ICE, internal combustion engine motors. And it is happening, it's like a wildfire. Clean air, and if you go back to that chart that we said, we can get more clean air that will drive our cars. Pollution, practically nothing, and also the efficiency. Clean air from solar or from wind, it goes essentially into the grid, and there it goes to the batteries, and the batteries feed the cars, essentially. A lot of people ask the question, how are we going to do that when it doesn't, when we do not have enough sun, or we don't have wind stops? Well, first of all, we can have more batteries on this. The nice thing is that we also have a lot of small gas plants that produce electricity. Right here in the city of San Jose, there are 3, 4, 5 of them. We don't see them, they don't smell, they don't have any big stacks, and they produce a lot of electricity. One more thing that they have is that you can bring up a gas-fired plant in less than half an hour, 20 minutes. You just turn on the gas and the fire goes on, it turns the turbines in less than 20 minutes. You can do that with coal factory. It takes a day to bring it up and produce electricity. So the advantages are quick installation of solar. Once you get the license, you can really put them on in days or months. No more despoiling of the earth for fossil fuel, and when the useful life of the renewable energy facilities is finished, they can be recycled, dismantled, and recycled. Minimal maintenance is required, and that provides stability in prices. Renewable energy hardly uses any water, which is very important. Energy security, lower bills, and residential solar power. You can see them in solar areas. A lot of people putting them on. And according to the EIA, Energy Information Administration, the solar energy is expected to grow faster than any other renewable energy through 2050 at a compounded growth of 1732. In just 5 years, it will double. This here, it is a very busy chart. All I want to show with this, in 2011, 2010, this was the coal produced electricity. And this is what it is now, which is practically 1/4 of what it was then. And this shows the various types of energy, and you can see how much solar is expected to increase when wind. This is just that little part there. And there is a revolution in electric cars production, batteries, cost of battery is going down, cheaper than ICE after a couple of years, and more companies and countries have already announced the end of ICE, electrical combustion engine cars. China leads the way on this. They have more electrical cars than anybody else, and the U.S. government is going to replace all the government fleet, which is about 650,000 cars for the post office and other uses, with EVs. And we said that we don't need much water. This gentleman, Martin Ross, which was president of the British Association of Advancers of Science. It is a busy chart. I'll only say that we had done so many remarkable things that we missed. At the same time, in the beginning of the century, no nuclear energy, no antibiotics, and were done, no jet aircraft, yet we created so many great things in the past century. But we missed a lot. We did a lot of things. There was horrors in the Industrial Revolution, people working in hellish slums, child labor, 16 work days, and so forth. But the future is, I'm going to be moving a little bit faster to cover. So this is what's happening with renewable energy. And we can go into...
You have all the time, sir.
I'm sorry, how much time?
You have all the time, sir. You don't need to accelerate.
Okay, we're moving to war. Countries with nuclear weapons. At present, 9 countries have nuclear weapons, and some of them thermonuclear. Another 10 to 15 can build them if they want to. The world moved from black powder to dynamite, nuclear bombs, hydrogen bombs, and every time we would make this move, it was 100x, 5,000x destructive power. Over 10,000 nuclear weapons that can be delivered by aircraft, missiles, cruise missiles, submarines, you name it. Thousands of tactical nuclear weapons. We make the big ones, we make the tactical ones that are going along with soldiers, and they can wipe out a valley of the enemy. This is what the defense budget looks like. Here's the U.S. practically half of the total war budget comes from the U.S. Here is China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and so forth and so on. Why are we spending all this money? Here's another chart. U.S. 39, China second, 9.5% percentage-wise of how it is spent. Now, is it going to be a nuclear war? I would say probably not planned. Of all the history that we have seen, and they have been described in a book, there were 9 events where practically they were accidents that almost happened. During the Cuban crisis, the U.S. and USSR were around Cuba. As everybody knows, there was a submarine detected by a U.S. destroyer, which was right on top of it, and they wanted him to surface. They threw around some firecrackers, I would say, minor explosives, and what happened was the Russians, because they were not in contact with their offices in Moscow, they had a policy where the 3 people in the submarine would decide whether or not to launch nuclear weapons, and it had to be unanimous. Well, they didn't launch because the vote was 3-2, and it came to surface later that we almost had essentially a disaster. And the man that said no died around 2000, and the New York Times said that, "Thank you so much for saving us from the nuclear holocaust." And just in 1990, when Yeltsin was president, a missile was coming towards the Soviet Union, and it came within 3 minutes. They were ready to launch. And they found out there is a treaty between the U.S. and NATO and everybody that you have to forewarn when you are doing testing of missiles, the other side. Well, they found out that, yes, Norway had sent a message to Russia around 5 o'clock with a fax machine. The Russian guy was not there, and we almost had they were ready to launch nuclear weapons. It came down to 3 minutes, and then they told Yeltsin that the missile was going to the North Pole to doing some atmospheric research and this and that. There are so many of those, I cannot go through them on that. So many people have written Schlesinger during the missile crisis, which was President Kennedy's #1 aide. This was not only the most dangerous moment in the Cold War, it was the most dangerous moment in human history. That's what he said. Various thoughts, and I'm going to be closing soon. Erasmus, back in the 15th century, as peace, I am not praised of both men and goods as the source and defender of all goods. When certain princes see power supporting from them because a general peace has lent them expendable, they stir up war to remain in power. Rousseau, never did the mind of man conceive a scheme nobler, more beautiful, or more useful than that of the lasting peace between all the people of Europe. Never did a writer better deserve a respectful learning from he was suggesting means of putting down, and so forth. And Rousseau and others said so many things. In ending, technology for renewable energy can take care of global warming. it can enhance the civilization globally by elevating underdeveloped countries. In addition, it will stop energy from becoming a casus belli, a pretext for cause for war. And let us move forward. Let us make the earth the true Garden of Eden, so much better with permanent life and the abolition of nuclear weapons. Let us live with knowledge, virtue, and happiness. Knowledge may not save us, but we cannot be saved without knowledge. And I'd like to get this famous quote from Kazantzakis: love responsibility. Say, it is my duty and mine alone to save the earth. If it is not saved, then I alone am to blame. I have a lot of other material. I'm ending at this point, and I'm ready for questions.
Nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, if people want to ask a question, you can write it in the chat, and I will read them. So, after our questions today, I had the first question. It refers to your chart over where energy goes and the notion of heat rejection versus power generation. Thank you. Let's watch that. Wonderful. Now, I remember from high school thermodynamics that there is an energy efficiency maximum. Does heat rejection refer to the energy that gets lost due to thermodynamics when that happens, or do you refer to what is lost after the power is produced and before we actually use it in our houses or in industry?
I think the way I understand your question is, if we look at this chart, let's take a look at all the heat that we use, for example, out in, let's say, natural gas or coal that they're using for plants. There is a maximum that you can get out of it. If you try to capture too much, the law of thermodynamics applies. And that's what's causing. Now, some factories, for example, with coal, they are using, you have seen the huge towers there that they have to cool off the thing to go back, recirculate it essentially. Well, they get efficiency of 30 to 40%. In Sweden and some very northern countries, they use the heat instead of cooling the air, so to speak. They have pipes that go under the sidewalks and this and that, and they get, you can call that part of the efficiency. They get another 2-3%. But no plant gets more than 40%.
Actually, we did that at Virginia Tech. The hot water for the dorms on campus came from the coal-fired power plant. That's correct,
but you're using some of it. In order to bring it from the power plant, we used to do this at the University of Illinois. We had our own power plant essentially. You have so much loss just bringing the heat pipes from one end of campus to the other one, and so there is so much that you can get. And coal has been around for so many years. All the tricks that they could do, they did on them, but this is where we are now, 30 to 40% efficiency.
Okay. Our next question is from our district governor. What is the state and cost of storing energy from renewables?
The cost, actually, it gets to be very competitive. If you use batteries, I know a company very famous, I don't want to say names over the air. They had a big contract in Australia, and essentially this big town uses a lot of solar energy that they keep it for 24 hours. Essentially, they store it in, it's competitive. The nice thing about it is, even though it's a little bit expensive per kilowatt, it is being used for so long. You know, you recycle so much energy through there that it makes a lot of sense. It just adds a few cents to your electricity. And talking about the cost of electricity, by the way, there are contracts down in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and those countries where they have a lot of sun, where companies are building solar plants and they sell the electricity for 2 cents. It has gotten that low in those countries. In other countries, even around here, you can, it doesn't cost more than 3 to 5 cents if you have a lot of sun.
So, next question is from Evangeline Malas. What are the side effects of solar energy to the wildlife and land, and is living near a solar area dangerous?
I don't see any problem. You may say the wildlife, the way that they store them, where they have them, wildlife can move under there. Small animals can move. Obviously, they're not going to have big cows and things like that, but sheep and goats and so forth, they can move under there. And I could say a couple of things on how they put them together. They essentially are about 3 to 4 feet off the ground. So the wildlife can move under there. There's no heat effects or anything from the panels. Another thing I can say, the NRL, which is the big U.S. research government agency in Colorado, they calculated that everybody puts a solar panel up on his roof, has solar energy, that will cover itself 42% of all the energy we're using in the U.S. But the deserts, in order to, they have calculated how much land we need for the entire United States to cover all of the electricity. It's a square 100 miles by 100 miles. And it can easily be out down in Nevada or in Arizona or the California, southeast corner.
Well, I don't know if you have ever been to the border of California and Nevada where they have that concentrated solar power plant, and apparently when birds fly into there, they get cooked in midair. But now, I'll move on.
The temperature of the panels is not very high.
No, it's in direct solar power. They take the sun and they concentrate it on a south tower and they run that through a turbine.
You're talking about the thermal plants. Those
solar thermal.
Yeah, it is. There are 2 types of solar energy. One of them comes from the solar panels, and that's the majority by far, and the cheaper ones. That those panels don't get that hot. What gets hot is they have these thermal plants, which they have mirrors around a big tower, and that tower has hot water in it essentially. And all these mirrors direct the energy towards the plant. Now that gets very hot, but we're talking like if you have seen in the Midwest where they have those water supplies high up above the earth, so they have pressure in the cities. And those get very hot, but we're not talking about big things. We're talking about 30-meter, 20-meter radius.
Mm-hmm. So next question is from George Zaharis. Suppose we turn all transportation electricity grid green. How much would we reduce our total greenhouse gas emissions? Don't we need to get to zero emissions of the whole?
Can you repeat that slowly?
Sure. Get back to it. Suppose we turn all transportation and electricity grid green. How much would we reduce our total greenhouse gas emissions? Don't we need to get to zero emissions as a whole?
If you look on this chart, you can see that of all the transportation we have today, it will go down essentially by you can see from the energy here, let me take a look at, read the number, from 28%, it will go down by by essentially 60 to 80%. Now that is only from transportation. And I must say something else. The other on what is happening right now is this autonomy vehicles that you all have heard about it, which means that the prediction here is that eventually we're not going to need the number of cars is going to be reduced by a factor of 2, because people are not going to need as many cars, because you can have a car which parks around your neighborhood, you call it, you go somewhere, and then you use it, and you tell them to go park again, and you don't need as many cars. These autonomous vehicles are a reality in some places. They are already being used for delivering pizzas and this and that, and many states are allowing them on an experimental basis to try to do that. And it could be also reducing tremendously the accidents we have with our cars, because they have proven that many companies, they have put millions of miles on them with no accidents. And don't forget, 40,000 people in the U.S. are dying in the highways.
Another question from George Zaris. Studies show food production, especially meat, has a large carbon footprint, as well as being the driving force behind the destruction of the natural world. How are we going to solve this? Can we convince people to change their diet?
Again,
no, sorry.
I lost you.
Studies show food production, especially meat, has a large carbon footprint, as well as being the driving force behind the destruction of the natural world. How are we going to solve this? Can we convince people to change their diet?
Well, again, that one, I do not have the technical answer. However, it goes back to the part of our, the first part of the book, which is with knowledge and virtue, that every person has to essentially become more, have more knowledge and decide all of those things for himself and herself. And that is one of them. Because we everybody knows how much water is being used to produce 1 kilo of meat and this and that. And it is something that we all need to work on, and it is covered to a certain degree, but that comes to an individual person, how we can make have perfection of men, essentially. That includes women too. And how we make more people, we make people better.
Yeah,
excellent.
Being an agronomist, I will have to add to that the Greek answer is that this is quite complicated, but this is your speech today. So, the next question is by Evangeline Malas. Great information sharing. Is there an endeavor to enable individual homes or neighborhoods to go with renewable energy?
The last part is that how neighborhoods can grow with renewable energy?
She's asking if there is an endeavor to enable individual homes or neighborhoods to go with renewable energy.
Of course. Right now, you get these phone calls, at least in my neighborhood here. The Mountain View city gives free panels. So you can put on top of your house and have a lot of energy, which is practically free.
Next one is from our district governor. U.S. government directs subsidies to the fossil fuel industry at billions per year, with 20% currently allocated to coal and 80% to natural gas and crude oil. How can renewable energy compete and become financially competitive?
Well, already it is competitive. I will give you statistics. In the last 4 years, everybody was saying, and our former president said that he was going to help Appalachia and all of those countries and so forth and so on to really push those people. A lot of them are having a lot of work there. Well, I will tell you that in the last 4 years, 60 coal plants have shut down. One new was built, and the number of people that are working in those plants are 75,000 total people working in coal production, where the solar cells, the solar and wind energy occupies something like 250, by now 300,000 people. Now the subsidies, it's very unfortunate, when you see that the government gives subsidies for the electric cars and solars and this and that. They don't say anything about the subsidies they provide to oil and gas. And if you include people until a few years back, they were saying, why do we need to have such a big defense budget? Well, we got to keep the lanes. We don't want to be without oil and this and that. Calculate all of those things together. You can see where the subsidies are.
Yeah. Next one is a comment by me. The U.S. is more honest than other countries about defense spending. The Turkish Ministry of Defense spending is only 50% of the actual military expenditure, for example. And sure, the United States does have more carriers than the rest of the world, but that's not necessarily the case with the spending for defense purposes. Now, the next question is from Steve Drolapas, who is asking if this presentation will be available online to non-attendees, and I can actually answer that. Yes, it will be. Our district governor has already put up the previous 2 lectures online at the AHEPA channel. The last question so far is by J.P. Kopoulos. What is heat problem operating EV engines? I understand Las Vegas is too hot in the summer for an EV fleet, electric vehicle, I assume.
I'm sorry, Alexander, I didn't catch that. Can you repeat it?
Mr. Kopoulos still here, you see.
Yes.
Yeah, can you ask it live?
Sure. Right now, the Nevada legislature is contemplating boosting electric vehicles and EV fleet. The problem in Las Vegas, they cannot run an electric bus service, the garbage trucks, and some of the other vehicles with electric because the heat in the summertime, upwards of 100 degrees, raises havoc with electric vehicles. And I just wondered what the issue is and what's the industry doing about that.
I'm not really that knowledgeable, but I would think that they would find ways of cooling them, right? Like they are cooling right now, the air conditioning and those other, you can have air conditioning, and that some of that air conditioning, the energy is going to be, the car is not going to be as efficient to cooling the battery or whatever causes the problem.
The batteries. They need to cool the batteries.
Okay, that's fine. It's just they become less efficient.
Yeah. So there's got to be a way to fix that then.
Yeah, I don't really, I'm not sure how big the problem is, how much the energy efficiency. It just means that part of the energy of the battery is going to cool itself.
Right.
But I don't have a solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Our district governor has posted the link to the YouTube channel. Does anyone else have any other questions they would like to ask?
I just had one other question. I know your flow charts are on U.S. energy, but we understand both India and China are adding coal plants. For every one we shut down, they're adding 2 or 3. How's the world going to adjust to that?
Okay, that I think is old information. In the last 3-4 years, they have changed quite a bit. China, I know, is putting much more nuclear than, but at the same time, they put half of solar and wind energy per year in China of the entire world production. Now, I will give you something else, some other information on this, that really what is, let me just find the, if calculate how much energy is being used by the world, we are 4.5% of the population. However, we are using the world's 20% of the energy. Okay?
Okay.
This is something, and now, of course, those will be changing, but we are using much more energy than the Europeans and of course, the underdeveloped countries hardly use much. And I have the numbers somewhere here. I can find it, or I can send to you. I have it in the book, this information.
That's fine. That helps me a lot. I understand a lot better.
By far, 2-3 times the amount of the average Chinese or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
The biggest for energy consumers per capita tend to be some Persian Gulf countries and then the United States. Is there any other question here?
I'll ask one more if I can.
You may.
They are now beginning to propose a carbon tax. I was wondering what your opinion of the carbon tax is.
I'm all for it.
Okay.
And along with all these things that we're talking about, there are things that are immeasurable. We don't know how many people get sick from the carbon dioxide, from the emissions of the carbon
Right.
in the air. As we said before, they contain substances like mercury and other things that are highly that infect people. People cannot breathe. And our air is going to get cleaner. I'm very optimistic about it.
Okay.
And by the way, California has essentially no coal plants or electricity coming from there. Essentially, California right now has moved to that step where we have no coal plants, and we have, of course, natural gas, and but the cars in some areas like Los Angeles, they emit so many bad materials, and we were pioneers. This country is really enlightened. We we took the lead out of the gas, which was a tremendous, and all the world has followed us. It happened here in California.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, let us thank again our speaker and thank everybody for participating. And we will see you next month. The Greek counselor from San Francisco, he will have a speech on March 20 over the bicentennial of the Greek state. Thank you.